We begin this morning with President Donald Trump refusing to apologize for the racist posts on his social media of former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. Last night on Air Force One, he said it wasn't his fault.
Mr. President, a number of Republicans are calling on you to apologize for that post. Is that something you're going to do?
No, I didn't make a mistake. I mean, I look at a lot of thousands of things, and I looked at the beginning of it. It was fine. They had that one post, and I guess it was a takeoff. By the way, a lot of people covered. If you look at where it came from, I guess it was a takeoff on The Lion King, and certainly it was a very strong post in terms of voter fraud. Nobody knew that was at the end. If they would have looked, they would have seen it, and probably they would have had the sense to take it down.
Take on The Lion King or not, the racist video on his social media account was posted late Thursday, the 5th day of Black History Month, and it depicts the Obamas as apes, a longtime racist trope that has deep historical roots. The post sparked backlash with Democratic and Republican lawmakers who quickly condemned it. After nearly 12 hours online, the White House deleted the post and placed the blame on a staff member. Joining us now, Symone Sanders Townsend, co-host of The Weeknight on MS Now, and Miles Taylor, former DHS Chief of Staff in the first Trump administration and founder of Defiance.org. Thank you both so much for joining us, especially Symone. You had a late night with the show last night. So let's dive right into this. From the scrubbing of an article honoring Jackie Robinson at the beginning of this administration to the whitewashing of Medgar Evers, there is a consistent commitment to racial revisionism from this administration.
I think that's
well, what's the human cost of this?
Look. First of all, there are no apes in The Lion King.
Let's be very clear.
This explanation.
Rafiki is a baboon.
Thank you. Yeah, and there's only one of him. He literally left his, but you know what? They need to watch the movie. They think we haven't seen it. But none of these explanations are sufficient from them about this video or the things that they're doing when it comes to the history of this country. But what this White House is trying to enact is frankly something. There's a movement across the country for this. There's a movement to revise history, to not teach all of our history, only teach the good parts, right? As though we can fully understand this country without teaching the full picture. So I think the human cost of this is it sends a signal, which is why, even though I do believe this is a distraction, it does need to be addressed. Yeah. Because if it's not addressed, it sends a signal to other leaders. It sends a signal to other organizations. It can send a signal to businesses. It can send a signal to young people that this is actually acceptable and okay. And the last point I'll make is you talked about the historical racist trope. There's a direct line from what the white Europeans cooked up as a justification for colonization in the 1700s to this assault on quote-unquote DEI that we have seen from particularly this administration. These are two sides of the exact same coin. But if you don't understand your history, right, which is why we have to know all of it, then you might struggle to understand. You might struggle to grasp that.
I think the thing that's really important for journalists to really be clear-eyed about, for the people in the media apparatus, for lawmakers, for regular everyday Americans, is just to accept that this is who Donald Trump is, right? Whether or not he himself pushed post, if a staffer actually did it, that staffer believed that they would not be in trouble if they posted this video depicting the Obamas as apes or gorillas or whatever they're supposed to be. I want to look at some of Trump's racist history that we have a full screen of. In 1975, consent decree over discriminatory rental practices. 1989, he called for the death penalty for the now exonerated Park Five. He pushed the Obama birtherism allegations starting in 2011. 2018, he called them S-hole countries at 7 a.m., so I'll keep it cute. At 2022, dinner with Nick Fuentes, a known racist, at Mar-a-Lago. Efforts to reframe U.S. history and slavery in 2025. He's been saying Somalians are garbage also since 2025. Symone, I want to stick with you on this because I feel like oftentimes, and we've talked about this in our group chat, is that people want the president to be different. They want, it reminds me of his whole first term when it was like, this is the day he became president, right? And it's like, we have to actually accept who he is because it tells us where we are as a country, what people are willing to accept in the Republican Party, what the Democratic Party should stand for, and what people who think that racism is bad should also stand for.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reality of the situation is Donald Trump he's two things. I believe he's a master marketer, and he is wildly consistent. And he has, this wasn't new, so I'm not surprised that he did this. I'm disappointed. I'm exasperated. It's like it was the 5th day of Black History Month. Goodness, like, what are y'all doing? But also, what to me it says for all the Republicans, I'm thinking about all the Republicans I saw that rushed to say, I called the White House, I told them this wasn't okay, and then by the end of the evening it became, I know the president, he's not racist. Okay, well, I will just say the president has been consistently telling us who he is, and so if we accept that this is who he is, then that also means the people that have propped him up, that have excused the racism, the white supremacy, the xenophobia, the sexism, because they liked his economic policy, right? That those people have to reckon with the decisions that they themselves made. So I think it's easier to try to make this a one-off situation as opposed to looking at it holistically for some folks.
I think this is, Miles, where, when we're talking about history revisionism, I think Donald Trump, when back in 2020, he called the 1619 Project ideological poison. And then, though, you even look at this weekend, Bad Bunny's performance, right? And the right is trying to make his performance an anti-patriotic halftime show. That is where I was interested to see how many Republicans were actually going to stand up and speak out against this depiction of the Obamas. And there was actually a longer list of Republicans than we're used to. Where does this go? And is this part of something that is bigger moving forward?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned 2020. I will never forget, in the lead up to the election in 2020, one of the really absurd things Donald Trump said. He said in October that he was the greatest president for blacks since Abraham Lincoln.
That's a quote.
Now, what I think people didn't realize is he was also going to take us back to the time of Abraham Lincoln. He's given a time machine to black Americans to experience what blacks could experience back then by using this type of rhetoric, by putting that timeline we see up there of Donald Trump. The only thing that's left out of that timeline is 20 times as many incidents that happened in private with the man. And I will confess to having gone into the first Trump administration thinking he probably isn't a bigot in his heart of hearts. That's probably just a mean criticism of the man. He's clearly an amoral person, but he can't be an actual bigot, right? Until meetings with him, when you would hear things like this and worse. I'll give you an example, and I'll give you the receipts. March 2019, I'm sitting in the Oval Office with the president. He's mocking people of color that come across the border alone with their children and saying, and he goes into an accent, oh, please help me, I need help. Then he says, at least if they showed up with a husband, I could put him in the fields to pick corn or something. Donald Trump, President of the United States. This is how the man in private views people of color, immigrants, people he doesn't want in this country. He mocks them and he derides them. So to your question, Vaughn, about what this means for Republicans, there's a quiet bigotry of passing the buck. That quiet bigotry is saying, well, he did it, but not me, or the staffer did it, not me, and dun, 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 it's over, I don't have to say anything. After yesterday, I now understand, for the first time, why you could be a young black American looking at politics and saying, wait a second, all the people who didn't say anything or pretended this was a one-day story, they're in on this. They're in on this, and clearly they're supporting this guy. Even if those folks console themselves by saying, well, I condemned him and we can move on. No. If you're someone who saw the president do this and you don't see the people in his own party vocally and consistently condemning it, you just assume they're on board with it. That's real bad for the fabric of our country. That's real bad for civic unity. And again, that's a time machine back to the 1860s.
Why do they always want black people to move on?
It is really easy when you are not the victim or the target of a certain type of ism, whether it's racism, sexism, like, it is easy to be like, you know what, well, we talked about it, now let's move on. Well, I live this every day. Simone lives this every single day. It is actually impossible for us to move on from these kind of tropes, right? Because we get the exact same thing in our inboxes and online when we're just doing our current jobs.
Yeah.
You know what some of these white Republican staffers do understand? I had lunch with one this week, and they do understand that the politics of this is bad for them. This person had said to me, totally happy with Trump, except this racist SHIT is bad. These are people who supported us. We shouldn't be doing this. He also pointed actually to other agencies that have put out equally as horrific and disturbing things. People who hold the keys to the social media accounts who are sitting around and tweeting white nationalist images, Sundays in America with depictions of just white people going to church. I mean, Miles, you at one point you knew the president. Do you personally believe he is racist, and have you seen him make racist comments firsthand?
Unequivocally, not just that episode in the Oval Office. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, the thing that hit me first in that administration, it's not like I was socially close with the man. I didn't need to be to know that he harbored these views. We would go sit in the Oval Office, and he would delineate the countries where he did not want to see any more people come into the United States. Countries like Somalia and Ethiopia and any country in Africa that didn't include white South Africaners, and say, okay, well, I guess he doesn't want people from those countries. But then the president would say, here are places where I want to turn on the spigots. I want people from Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden. I've traveled to the Nordic countries. I can tell you a little something about the Nordic countries and the prevailing race in the Nordic countries. A lot of white people, a lot of people with blonde hair. After you see that kind of side-by-side with the president making very clear to you, I need more white rich folks coming into this country. I need fewer black folks and people of color coming into this country. What other conclusion can you come to? In his heart of hearts, this is who he is. But you make a really good point, Jackie, that he is essentially cultivating a generation of young, creepy bigots. He is grooming young men in the Republican Party to be like he is, to be like Donald Trump, and to harbor these views. He's permitting it. It's why we see it in GOP group chats. It's why we see this lexicon, this discourse that favors bigotry making its way back into the Republican Party for the first time in a significant way in a very long time.
Because at the end of the day, for people who are saying, oh, it's just a picture, it's just a video, at the heart of this, it is Donald Trump and Stephen Miller getting to decide and feeling they are the only ones who gets to decide who is an American.
Can I just say, that's the point. Because, frankly, I don't care if Donald Trump is personally racist. I care if the President of the United States is taking his racist views and imbuing it into policy within the federal government. I care if the Deputy White House Chief of Staff, who, you know, has some white nationalist tendencies and seems to believe the white nationalist, white supremacist playbook, which is, I'm talking about Stephen Miller, if he is imbuing that into policy in the federal government. So that is the concern, I think, that people should have across the country about what this means for the policy. Whether he's personally racist or not, I feel like that's his business.
Well, Simone, I'm glad you said that, because what they've done since the first term is all those things he fantasized about. Let's shut off black and brown people coming into the country. Let's bring, you know, white rich people in from Europe. He didn't get to do in the first term. We rejected it. That was obviously immoral, unethical, maybe illegal. Now he is doing it. The most recent immigration policy from this administration turns off basically every country on the face of the globe except white people from South Africa. And people, by the way, there's a policy of this administration, if they speak out against European left-wing governments and they need a place to stay, well, we can bring in refugees from Europe who are attacked for criticizing the policies of their government.
All right, so there's a big week ahead in the ongoing Epstein file saga. On Monday, members of the House Oversight Committee will depose convicted Epstein accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell. Also on Monday, members of Congress will get their first chance to review the unredacted versions of the 3 million recently released files. Meanwhile, some repercussions to the Epstein files are already playing out overseas. Former UK ambassador to the United States, Peter Mendelsohn, is retiring from Parliament's upper chamber due to his links to Epstein. He was fired as ambassador by Prime Minister Keir Starmer back in September over his ties to Epstein. Mendelsohn has denied any knowledge of or complicity in Epstein's sexual crimes. And now Starmer is also facing growing calls to resign since he appointed Mendelsohn. In countries like Poland, Norway, France, and Slovakia, we are now seeing a flood of investigations and resignations into people linked to the late sex offender. But here at home, the latest batch of documents are being slammed over questionable reactions. For example, take a look at this 2014 email addressed to Epstein. It reads, quote, "Thank you for a fun night. Your littlest girl was a little naughty." The sender's name is redacted, and it is a reminder of the sensitive matter being dealt with here and why the push for accountability is so dire. But getting full accountability appears to still be a long ways off under the Trump administration. Take a listen to this statement made by Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche about the people named in the files.
It is not a crime to party with Mr. Epstein. And so as horrible as it's not a crime to email with Mr. Epstein. And some of these men may have done horrible things. And if we have evidence that allows us to prosecute them, you better believe we will. But it's also the kind of thing that the American people need to understand, that it isn't a crime to party with Mr. Epstein.
Joining us now, California Congresswoman Sara Jacobs. She serves on the Foreign Affairs and Armed Services committees. Congresswoman, it's good to have you here. So as we mentioned, we're starting to see some fallout overseas, resignations, investigations. But here, domestically, the administration seems to at least be stonewalling any credible attempt at accountability. And it's interesting when you see the names that are redacted, and I want to get to your thoughts on this whole redaction issue, and certainly going forward in the week ahead. Some of the people whose names are redacted had some of the most disgusting and vile comments that were made. It wasn't just about partying. There were clearly innuendos and references to young girls in very disturbing ways. And yet there are names that are not redacted in the Epstein files. What do you plan on doing this week with the redaction and being able to access it? Do you think we're going to learn the names of some of these individuals? How do we get to that?
Yeah, well, I'm glad that there is accountability in other countries, and we're going to keep working until there's full accountability here for anyone who committed a crime. And I am very concerned that the Trump administration's Department of Justice seems to have redacted a number of the co-conspirators while not protecting and not redacting the names of survivors, including even releasing naked pictures of them when they were girls, their addresses, other identifying information, which is blatantly against the law that we passed that said protect the survivors, but you cannot redact the names of the co-conspirators. But even with all the redactions, we know that Donald Trump is mentioned 38,000 times in the Epstein files. Donald Trump is literally mentioned more in the Epstein files than Harry Potter is mentioned in the Harry Potter books. And so, yes, I'm glad that we're making progress and we're going to get more information and more of these names are going to come out. And we don't need more information to know that Republicans should be holding Donald Trump accountable. They should be dragging him in, making him answer questions. And if they don't do it when we're in power, we will.
So I guess sort of going off of the question of redactions and what might be happening there behind the scenes, do you think that it's at all possible, and are lawmakers asking the DOJ about this at all, that there may be secret deals that we do not know about between law enforcement agencies, the DOJ in the past, whoever it might be, and potential co-conspirators or former employees of Epstein that just at this point have not been made public? Is that a possibility that you're looking into?
That's absolutely a possibility, and it's why we requested a justification for the redactions, because maybe there was some information and deal made, but they gave us no justifications for the redactions. And they've now said that they're done releasing files, even though these are really only half the files, and they are in clear violation of the law that was passed through the House, through the Senate, and signed by the president.
Congresswoman, in addition to the president, there is some suggestion or some evidence that some of the other members of his administration may have had closer relationships, shall we say, with Jeffrey Epstein than has been publicly revealed to be the case. CBS, for example, is gathering from the latest DOJ document drop, the Epstein files, that Howard Lutnick, who was the Commerce Secretary, and Epstein may have been in business together. I think we have some documents on the screen, or at least the story from CBS. They both signed a contract, for example, for the purchase of an advertising firm back in 2012. Now, Howard Lutnick has said publicly that he cut ties with Jeffrey Epstein because he found him gross and disgusting, I think as far back as 2004, 2005. These documents suggest that they were signing documents to have stakes in a firm as recently as 2014. Will you be investigating the possible ties between other members of this administration and the late Jeffrey Epstein?
Absolutely. And I think that we're already seeing how much closer ties many people close to Trump had, right? Melania, Lutnick, Elon Musk, and others. And I think it's very concerning. And we need to be holding everyone accountable who was part of this, regardless of what positions they hold, regardless of their political party. Because honestly, this just goes to show what the American people have long felt, right? That if you're wealthy, if you're powerful, you get to play by a different set of rules and you're not held accountable. And it's time for that to end.
I got to ask you about an important part of all of this, which is, and you just talked about the close ties Epstein had with so many people in the administration. As you know, there are a lot of questions as to whether or not Epstein was associated with foreign intelligence services and other governments. There have been reporting to suggest that he was linked to the KGB. There's reporting to suggest that he was linked to the Israeli intelligence services. How do you go about investigating that? Because the Israeli prime minister has come out and said Jeffrey Epstein's unusual close relationship with Ehud Barak doesn't suggest Epstein worked for Israel. It proves the opposite. And I don't think that's going to silence those who have been combing through these emails and finding multiple links between Jeffrey Epstein and Israel through various causes, people associated with Israel, the former prime minister, and agents, as well as Russia and the KGB. Poland is investigating him possibly being a KGB agent. What is the U.S. government going to do, or the U.S. Congress going to do, to find out whether Jeffrey Epstein worked on behalf of or associated with foreign intelligence services?
Yeah. I mean, the House Judiciary and the House Oversight Committees are really the ones leading this investigation, and they are doing a rigorous job of trying to figure out exactly what happened and how he got away with it.
They are currently doing that? You think they're currently asking those questions?
I think that they are trying to find all of the information they can, and in particular, how he was able to get away with this even after he was convicted, and why all of these people were still corresponding with him, why they were, still continuing to visit even after it was public, the disgusting and vile things that he did to young girls. So I think there are still a lot of open questions. But I think what's important to know is, regardless of who he was working with and for, it's clear that Donald Trump was mentioned 38,000 times and that we need to get answers.
I have to ask you before we go, what are you expecting from Ghislaine Maxwell in the coming days? I mean, this deposition, is this a big deal, or do you just expect her to continue to evade the truth, as she has been accused of so much in the past?
Look, I hope that she will be honest and forthright. That has not been historically what we've seen, and especially with the kid gloves that the Trump administration is, handling her with. And we've seen all the special treatments that she's gotten in her transfer and all of that. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get, some sort of real answers, because the fact of the matter is, what she helped, what all of these people did, was disgusting and illegal, and they should be held accountable. And we need transparency and accountability in order to make sure that these survivors get the justice that they so deserve.
Real quick, do you think Ghislaine Maxwell is in a safe place right now, before now, and when she actually has to? I mean, are you at all concerned about her security? Are you at all concerned about where she is, what kind of facility she's in, being kept in, given the important information that she has and that she may share with Congress?
I mean, it seems that she has made some sort of deal with the Department of Justice and the Trump administration, and that's why she got transferred. Obviously, we know there are a lot of questions surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein himself, and so none of that can be discounted. But I think we feel confident that she will appear and that, we'll be able to ask some questions.
Seems like the question is more, will she be speaking to you as lawmakers who she has to answer questions for, or is there really an audience of one who she has a message for?
Right. Who she's still hoping to get a pardon from.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
That's what I'm saying. Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs,
thank you so much
for
joining
us.
Thanks for having me.
This week, the Washington Post announced a new wave of layoffs, gutting the venerable newspaper staff by at least a third and eliminating entire sections of its global and metro news coverage. In 2013, the billionaire Jeff Bezos rescued the Post with his $250 million purchase at a time when it was shedding readers, losing millions of dollars, and struggling to adapt to the digital age. In his first town hall meeting with the Post staff, Bezos announced, quote, a new golden era for the Washington Post, adding, quote, I could provide financial runway, because I don't think you can keep shrinking the business. Crucially, Bezos pledged to invest in the Post, doubling its staff, expanding its global footprint, and he was lauded for never interfering in the editorial work of its newsroom. When Donald Trump first became president in 2017 and lashed out at the Post for its critical work covering Washington, Bezos's Post planted a new masthead that read, quote, democracy dies in darkness. According to the Post's former executive editor, Marty Baron, the company's expansion under Bezos's ownership paid off with 6 straight years of profitability. Reports even suggested the Post had expanded its subscriber base to 2.5 million subscribers. By 2023, however, the Post was losing enormous sums of money and eventually instituted 3 punishing waves of layoffs, including now the current one. The former deputy editor Ruth Marcus characterizes the moves this way, quote, "The owner who once offered Runway was unwilling to tolerate losses of that magnitude." By 2024, when it became clear that President Trump was likely to return to the White House, Bezos reportedly started interfering in earnest in the Post's op-ed pages. Things came to a head when just 11 days before the election, according to the Post's own reporting, Bezos axed the editorial section's endorsement of Kamala Harris for president, proclaiming the paper should never endorse presidential candidates ever again. That move and others did massive damage to the Post's brand, and it fueled an exodus of subscribers and, crucially, longtime writers like Jennifer Rubin, Robert Kagan, Michelle Norris, and Ruth Marcus. Jumping to today and a new round of layoffs, Ruth Marcus notes, with these brutal cuts, Bezos seems content to let the paper limp along, diminished in size and ambition. Unfortunately, this isn't just another media story. A diminished Washington Post, the paper that broke Watergate and countless stories consequential to our politics and our democracy, even today, diminishes a font of American journalism that now more than ever needs to hold our leaders to account. Joining me now is Ruth Marcus, contributing editor for The New Yorker. Ruth, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. Hey, Ruth, I want to point out, because there's a myriad media stories about where we're all struggling in this environment. But this is not just that. Sure, the Washington Post is struggling. Bezos comes in, gives it some runway. It seemed like a really good idea for a few years. This is about something else. This is not just the weakening of the Washington Post, but the weakening of the accountability that the Washington Post provides to this administration, and how that affects Jeff Bezos and his other monetary interests.
I couldn't agree with you more, and thank you so much for shining a light on this. This is part of a larger media story and the real tragedy for democracy of how because of the internet, which has allowed us to reach millions of more people, it's also destroyed our business model. AI is coming in and further destroying our business model. And so we have a really shrunken and enfeebled set of newspapers and news organizations across the country. The thing that's so tragic about this, I think, is twofold. It's the point that you made so passionately about the role of the Washington Post as a player, a beacon, really, in this media landscape, but also the unnecessary nature of it. We had a good owner before we didn't. We had an owner who was willing to give us the runway. He talked about himself just in December of 2024 like a doting parent for the Post, that he added complexity to us, but he also helped foot the bills. And that is so important, and that is, for whatever reason, no longer true. That affects not just my treasured colleagues at the Washington Post, but it does affect the ability of people across the country to benefit from the news that we were providing. And I think it really ties into the segment that you did just beforehand with my friend Michael Waldman about the threat to voting at the ballot box in November. If we're not around to shine light on that, if fewer people are around to shine light on that, how will people know what's happening?
So this is really important because it's got 2.5 million subscribers, probably. That's not most of the country, but it's disproportionately important as a publication. The Washington Post and many publications and media operations are. But they fired reporters around the world, so global coverage in a moment where, I mean, that's the wild thing to do, and then local coverage. And both of these affect the ability to bear witness. You cannot hold power to account if you're not bearing witness in the first place.
We have 3 local jurisdictions. I started as a Metro reporter at the Washington Post. I was in Prince George's County. We have multiple counties to cover in Maryland and Virginia. We have state houses to cover in Maryland and Virginia. We have the district. It's not just that democracy dies in darkness, as a wise man once said. It's that corruption flourishes in darkness. And if we don't have the Metro staff, that is going to happen. And by the way, it's not just the staffs that you mentioned that were eviscerated. Every piece of the paper is affected. We lost all of our photojournalists. We lost our audio folks. It's a diminished paper, and it's just tragic.
You said you had a good leader before you didn't, a good owner before you didn't. And you're talking about the same person, Jeff Bezos. And you said for whatever reason, things changed. And they changed very substantially when it appeared that Donald Trump was going to be the president again. What do you think the reason is? What's fundamentally behind this?
There are many different possible explanations, and I can't read minds, but I can lay out facts. The good set of facts for Jeff Bezos is that he was stalwart and brave and resolute and unyielding in the face of attacks by Donald Trump during President Trump's first term. Jeff Bezos had millions, billions of dollars at stake in enterprises that may be more important to him than the Washington Post, and he did not back down in the face of Trump's attacks. It's not just Jeff Bezos here. We saw all of those tech moguls on the dais with the president at his inauguration. We see Jeff Bezos and his wife having dinner with the Trumps at Mar-a-Lago. He seems to have a different attitude towards Trump and the importance of getting along with Trump than he did during the first term. And there is also a business aspect to it that I have to say, I understand as a businessman, $100 million sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money, which that's the amount that the Post lost in 2024, the last year we have figures for. That's a lot of money, even if your worth is $250 billion, which is about where Jeff Bezos is now.
Ruth, always great to talk to you. Thank you for shedding some light on this and for sharing some of your experiences. Ruth Marcus is a contributing writer at The New Yorker.
But we do want to turn now to the midterms, and we're just 10 months away from the elections, and Donald Trump is again pushing false claims about election safety and security in this country. He's now calling on Republicans to nationalize elections. Take a listen.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting.
What exactly did you mean when you said that you should nationalize elections? And which 15 states are you talking about?
I want to see elections be honest. And if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it.
All right, so you heard him there in his own words. And guess what? Just days later, Trump tried to play semantics with his statements, telling NBC News that he didn't really say what we heard him say in that clip that we just played for you. Take a listen to what he said.
I didn't say national. I said there are some areas in our country that are extremely corrupt. They have very corrupt elections. Take a look at Detroit. Take a look at Philadelphia. Take a look at Atlanta. There are some areas that are unbelievably corrupt.
Maya Wiley is back with us. So let me see, Detroit, Philadelphia, Atlanta, what do those three cities have in common?
Gee, Eamon, I don't know. Look, this is what we saw when Donald Trump's campaign in 2020 went around filing lawsuits, which, by the way, it's legally allowed to do, challenging the outcome of the 2020 election in places like Michigan, in Detroit, but not in the counties surrounding Detroit that were mostly white, or Giuliani in Philadelphia claiming that people from Camden, New Jersey had been coming over every single year to vote, and everybody knew it. And they lost every single one.
In Georgia, where they have a Republican governor and they had a Republican Secretary of State who Donald Trump called and tried to help get 11,000 votes.
But Atlanta is a black city.
No. But this is the point. The pattern is very clear. And even the patterns both of claiming that the reason we should not trust these elections that we have been so proud of as a country, by the way, from one party to another for decades, suddenly we shouldn't be proud of because Donald Trump didn't win in 2020. But the way they have been driving the disinformation narrative, because it's a lie, is the same thing that's driving their mass deportation efforts, which is we will claim that there are all these people who are people of color who are criminals, who are stealing from us, and that includes our elections. And so we have Republicans who, I mean, people who are self-identified Republicans, but nonpartisan election administrators saying, we're really proud of how we're running these elections. We're defending the outcomes of them, to your point, Eamon, and have been repeatedly, and their lives have been threatened. But I think we should not minimize just how aggressively this administration has been using every tool in its toolbox to turn it into a weapon against our elections and against states that won't do its bidding. So the FBI just recently did something unprecedented. DHS, FBI, the postal inspectors, who are the federal agents for the Postal Service, saying we're asking all state election officials to come and attend on February 25th a meeting where we're going to talk about how we're going to manage how we're going to basically protect elections. That's unprecedented and has them all worried about exactly how this administration is going to use levers of federal government to actually intimidate or try to browbeat them into doing things that will undermine voters. And it's often Black, Latino, and Asian and Native American communities. They're the ones they target to claim that there's something wrong.
Well, of course, another unprecedented piece of this is DNI Tulsi Gabbard being part of what we saw happen in Fulton County there. And then, as we've heard different Republicans be asked about this, it seems like the suggestion was that it's Attorney General Pam Bondi who ordered that she be there. Does the DNI top spy chief answer to the Department of Justice? Is that how it works, Maya?
No, that is not how it works.
What part of government education is that? Is that because we're in high school?
I think that's middle school.
We're
now down to middle school. Are you smarter than a fifth grader? We're getting there soon. No, this is not how it works. Although, of course, that doesn't mean they can. What's interesting is there's a whistleblower we're hearing about.
Yeah.
I want to see where that leads.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And who can forget Dominion voting systems as well, and all the situation with that, with the sale of that? A lot of questions. I don't think enough reporting has been done on that sale and what that portends for elections in the midterm, but we'll see.
I have a feeling we're going to start
Get some
seeing
more
more of these
reporting,
threads
yeah.
connect. Maya Wiley, thank you as always.
Thanks, Maya.
So good to see you.